Good evening. You're watching the news at 7:30 on ATV. I'm Edna.
And I'm Emily Sue. Here's a look at tonight's top stories.
Thailand enters new crisis as court orders Prime Minister to step down for abuse of power.
Surprise filibuster derails latest government effort to secure LegCo support for landfill expansion.
Beijing demands release of fishing boat crew arrested by Philippines in disputed waters. Thailand is facing fresh turmoil after a court ordered Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawatra to step down for abuse of power.
Yingluck has accepted the ruling, but her embattled government will remain in power until elections in July, setting the stage for another showdown between her opponents and supporters. ATV's Ben O'Rourke reports.
Today's ruling by Bangkok's Constitutional Court ends another chapter in Thailand's turbulent recent history, but opens the door to potentially more turmoil. Yingluck Shinawatra was found guilty of abuse of power for removing the national security chief in 2011 and later slotting one of her relatives in the role. The court said the process was irregular and designed to benefit her Pheu Thai party. The penalty Yingluck must pay is to quit her job, along with some of her top officials. In a national address after the verdict, Yingluck said she would not appeal and vowed to stand by the people and serve them in whatever position she would hold from now on. However, it's unclear what that role would be, as she is banned from politics under the Constitution. For her critics argue it was only a matter of time before Yingluck fell foul of the law, and if this case didn't spark her downfall, then her involvement in a failed rice buying scheme was sure to finish her. The ruling comes after months of anti-government rallies by yellow-shirted protesters who see Yingluck as nothing more than a proxy for her billionaire brother Thaksin. The former Prime Minister was ousted in a bloodless coup in 2006 and later found guilty of corruption. While he's still hugely popular in rural Thailand, his opponents feel he worked in the interests of Western corporations and did little to benefit ordinary people. He now lives in exile to avoid going to prison. The protesters have been camping on the streets of Bangkok since October last year, when Yingluck tried to pass an amnesty law that would have paved the way for her fugitive brother to return home without facing jail, and at the same time allow thousands of corruption suspects off the hook. Earlier this year, anger against Yingluck and her government reached boiling point when the rice farmers she'd been paying billions of baht in return for their votes blocked roads across the country and marched to Bangkok because their payments were overdue. To Yingluck's supporters, the court's decision has been described as a non-military coup, and her red-shirted followers have vowed to stand up and fight alongside her. While the red shirts have been supporting her throughout the past 6 months, their numbers have been dwarfed by those of the yellow shirts, who are celebrating today's ruling on the streets of Bangkok. But the victory is not completely theirs, as Yingluck's government remains in power until a general election scheduled for the 20th of July. She will be replaced by Commerce Minister Niwatamrong Bunsongpasan, according to the cabinet. He's a controversial choice, as he's been a Thaksin loyalist for decades, and he was the man whose job it was to try to pacify the protesting rice farmers by selling off the massive stock of rice so they could collect their subsidies. Thailand's Anti-Corruption Commission could indict Yingluck as early as tomorrow for her role in the scheme. Ben O'Rourke, ATV News.
Here in Hong Kong, a surprise filibuster by radical lawmakers has held up the government's latest bid to seek funding approval for incinerator and landfill expansion.
The delaying tactic, accompanied by a noisy protest in the public gallery, forced the suspension of the session. ATV's Raymond Young reports.
Cheung Kwan O residents protested as government officials arrived at LegCo this morning for another shot at persuading lawmakers to fund an incinerator and expand the city's 3 landfills. The demonstrators took aim at Environment Secretary Wong Kam Sing, accusing him of defying people by trying to bulldoze an unpopular proposal through LegCo. Sai-Kung District Councillor Christine Fong argued that it's unfair to those living near the Cheung Kwan O landfill, which has to accept waste from other parts of the city. Inside the chamber, Wong faced the wrath of lawmakers on the Public Works Subcommittee.
The
ATPL's Frederick Fung asked why he should support the project when the government hasn't done enough to cut waste production. Wong denied the allegation, citing the household waste charging scheme as an example of being proactive. Fernando Zheng of the Labour Party criticized officials for failing to give a better estimate on when the Chengquan-O landfill will reach capacity. Environment Protection Assistant Director Alan Chan said there were 540 square meters of space left at the end of last year. She admitted that's enough to accept rubbish for another 3 years, but warned that expansion work must be done in advance. Wong asked for residents' understanding, while insisting that all citizens must share the responsibility. His remarks drew a sharp response from Neo Democrat Gary Fan, who said Chengquan-O residents have had to endure foul-smelling and poor-quality air for decades. With the government sticking to its stance, Fan teamed up with Albert Chen from People Power to launch an impromptu filibuster. They tried to stall the debate by tabling 18 motions, which had to be put to a vote one by one. The first 10 motions were voted down amid a noisy protest in the public stands. Subcommittee Chairman Lo Wai-kwok was forced to call up the session after security guards struggled to restore order. The Environment Minister still has his work cut out for him when the session resumes next Tuesday. Raymond Yang, ATV News.
Occupy Central leaders have dismissed concerns among the Pan Democrats that radicals have hijacked the movement's referendum next month on universal suffrage.
But they admit that 3 political reform proposals for the referendum chosen by voters do not represent the views of the entire public. Occupy Central leaders Benny Tai and Chen Kin-man took to the airwaves this morning to discuss the implications of their citywide vote yesterday to decide on a short list of 3 political reform proposals. On the movement's third and final deliberation day, hosted in 5 locations, more than 2,500 participants were asked to choose one of 15 previously shortlisted proposals. Almost half opted for a joint proposal by student group Scholarism and the Federation of Students. The Radical People Power's plan was the second choice, while the Pan Democrats' 3-track proposal made it to 3rd place on the list. The 3 proposals will be put to a public vote in a referendum scheduled for the 22nd of June, and the final winning submission will be championed by the Occupy Central movement. All 3 proposals call for ordinary voters and not just the official nominating committee to be allowed to name candidates for the 2017 chief executive election, an idea strongly opposed by the government and Beijing. This has prompted concerns among the pro-democracy camp that the radicals have hijacked the campaign and sidelined moderate views that have a greater chance of being universally accepted.
I have written a letter to Alliance for True Democracies to discuss whether the People's Power and the League for Social Democrat have violated their promises to support the free track schemes.
Others say yesterday's results will discourage many from taking part in next month's referendum.
If Hong Kong people really had no choice other than to back a proposal regarding civic nomination, I would not myself be participating in the voting, and I believe that some of us who think that there is an alternative way of achieving true universal suffrage may not be too interested to vote either.
But sociology professor Chen Kin-man brushed aside such concerns, claiming that most of those who voted yesterday are retirees and teachers with no political background. Chen insisted that he did not find the results strange or surprising, as he was already expecting majority support for the students and the Pan Democrats' 3-track proposal. Law professor Benny Tai pointed out that 3 better-known moderate proposals included in the short list of 15 failed to secure even 5% of the 2,500 votes. Former Chief Secretary Anson Chan's proposal to let ordinary voters pick nominating committee members received only 43 votes, while civil recommendation backed by 18 scholars had 76.
Tai said this reflects a clear desire for civil nomination, as most do not trust the all-powerful nominating committee, which is the authority named in the Basic Law. But he admitted yesterday's poll does not represent the views of all 7 million Hong Kongers, adding that their aim was to seek public empowerment. Scholarism and the Federation of Students hosted a press conference today to celebrate their victory and urged voters to take part in the June referendum.
It is a way or a day to show what Hong Kong people really want, what they think it is best suit the development of the constitutional reform of Hong Kong.
Civic Party Chief Alan Leong agreed that civil nomination is essential for the 2017 election.
The response that I hope to get from the Central People's Government is that it will make a proposal to Hong Kong people that notwithstanding the absence of civic nomination, there could still be a real choice.
But those from the pro-establishment camp are not so optimistic.
We're very concerned and a bit disappointed that the way things are going, the likelihood of reaching a consensus between the central government and the Pan-Democrats, the chances are getting slimmer and slimmer.
It will be at least year-end before the government rolls out its final political reform package.
There's concern over an increase in the number of teenagers as young as 14 selling counterfeit products on the internet.
Many of the 45 people arrested for the offense in the first 4 months of the year used popular social networking sites to lure customers. These counterfeit items being sold online were confiscated by the Customs and Excise Department in the first quarter of this year. They include baby clothes, cosmetics, phone cases, toys and electronic equipment worth more than $1 million. Officers discovered a sharp rise in the number of people using social networking sites to sell counterfeit goods. Last year, 8% of the cases involved offenders using Facebook, WeChat, WhatsApp or public forums. The figure more than doubled to 17% in the first 4 months of this year alone, and many of the offenders were youths.
We believe that this is a very good channel for young people to share information. So when some of them discover that there is certain advantage of selling goods on social platform instead of auction site, they may have this information passed around, so more and more people is taking this modus operandi to sell counterfeits.
Of the 45 people arrested for selling counterfeit items, 1/3 were under 23, compared with 19% for the whole of last year. 13 of those detained between January and April were students, with the youngest aged just 14.
Well, we believe most of these young people, they are just doing this for quick money and try to earn a little pocket money. They are not well organized. For most of the cases we discover, the seizure involved was quite limited, just 1 or 2 or up to 8 or 10. So it's quite different from those professional ones.
The department warned that offenders face a maximum fine of $500,000 and 5 years in jail if convicted.
Banking giant HSBC has reported a 20% drop in first quarter profit. HSBC Holdings' pre-tax profit fell to $6.8 billion from $8.4 billion in the same period last year. The outlook this year is muted for Europe's largest bank, which makes most of its profit from Asia. Revenue took a dive at its investment bank this year, while last year earnings were driven by asset sales. In a new flare-up in regional tensions, Beijing is demanding the release of 11 Chinese fishermen arrested by Philippine police in disputed waters near the Spratly Islands. Manila claims the fishermen were carrying a cargo of more than 500 endangered turtles in Philippine waters. Raymond Young reports.
The drama began yesterday morning near Half Moon Shoal in the Spratly Islands, just 100 kilometers off the Philippine coast. A Chinese fishing vessel with 11 crew members was intercepted by armed Philippine police officers, who fired warning shots before storming the boat and seizing it. Another Chinese vessel nearby managed to escape. The detained fishermen are likely to be charged after about 500 turtles, some from protected species, were found on board. Beijing has brushed aside Manila's account and demanded the release of the boat and its crew, who all come from Hainan province. Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Hua Qianying called for a rational explanation and warned the Philippines to take no more provocative action. Hua reiterated that China has indisputable sovereign rights over the sea area, including Half Moon Shoal. Tensions are also building in another part of the South China Sea, where Beijing warning Vietnam not to disrupt the activities of Chinese companies operating near the Paracel Islands, another disputed region. Yesterday, Hanoi hit out after a giant Chinese oil rig moved into waters that Vietnam regards as its own. Analysts believe China's move is political rather than commercial. But dozens of patrol boats and Coast Guard vessels from both countries were reported to be converging on the area. Raymond Yang, ATV News.
Still to come on ATV's main news tonight. U.S. President sends team to Nigeria to help rescue more than 200 schoolgirls kidnapped by Islamist militants.
2 goals from debutant James Wilson gave